3 months ago, I did a video about former UFC MMA fighter Rampage Jackson becoming a passport bro, mainly because he was in the Philippines and he was filming it specifically through a live stream on a platform called Kick. And he seemed to be pretty good at it. Well, a part of his journey is his son, who he obviously has gotten into the Kick live streaming thing. And on his son's live stream, the son decided to visit a pro wrestling event because, believe it or not, Rampage Jackson also has history with pro wrestling. Years ago, he debuted in TNA wrestling, where he wrestled a couple of matches. So it makes sense that his son, who's also an MMA fighter apparently, decided to get involved with that. And so he was backstage, and one of the pro wrestlers decided to play a little joke on him. Get in his face like he had some beef, and then smacked him upside the head with a can. Clearly a prop like they usually use. And the son, they had a back and forth where they both apologized. And one of the pro wrestlers said, hey, we can do a little angle where you come into the ring and you can get your receipt back, which, you can get a firm hit, and then just be a part of the rest of the work, not trying to actually kill someone. But being the Negro that he is, his DNA kicked in and he just saw murder, murder, kill, kill. Especially since a white guy hit him upside the head. And that's significant, and that's why I highlighted it in my title, because the fact of the matter is, we know Negroes will snap on other black people too. We see it all the time. But when it's somebody so-called white that offends them, there's an extra blood boil that occurs. The false memories of oppression and slavery and Jim Crow, and how all of those narratives are constantly encouraged and inflamed by the mainstream media. All of that kicked in, and as a result, he took a joke and tried to turn it into a murder. And as you would predict, his father's standing up for him, trying to defend his actions. You have some people online who are trying to do the same, trying to make it basically seem like the guy deserved it because he picked on him. And again, this dude who got nearly killed, he's just an independent wrestler. And so this is going to be a financial burden on him to try to recover. Hopefully he can get a GoFundMe going. But my thing is when will these white folks learn that you can't joke with Negroes? And there's some naive white folks that actually think they have black friends. But as we've seen, you could say a magical word, and it doesn't always have to be nigger. You could just say black, referring to someone, and say black in a certain way, and the Negroes that you have around you will get homicidal rage over it and feel fully justified if they beat you to death, stab you to death over it. And, depending on what courthouse they enter into, they could get a sister girl judge or a racially cucked woke white or Jewish person that will let them off after they killed you or severely hurt you, which I routinely see as I, pay attention to the news. And again, ultimately, we'll see what comes about this situation. If Rampage Jackson gets heavily sued, or if his son does any time, more than likely that won't happen. At worst, he'll probably get financially punished for the savage acts of his son. But again, other so-called races of people, and particularly so-called white people, they better get a wake-up call, because most Negroes see every so-called white person, including white people that they're married to or friends with, they see them as a descendant of the most brutal, racist white slave owner that oppress their so-called ancestors, who they don't even know they're actually related to. I mean, that's the reality. That's the common conversation that you can see online. It's a part of the top 3 things Negroes like to talk about online. Outside of, gossip and Negro pop culture drama, battling over celebs and all that nonsense, it's talking about racism, white supremacy, despite them having zero personal experience with it. But again, it's just the physical presence of somebody so-called white. The presumed offense over a word or an action, even if you think it's a joke, in the Negro's mind, it's a green light to murder. And it's a part of how just Negroes in general are raised, but it's also a part of this Western civilization that encourages and even rewards victimhood. I mean, we saw a career criminal literally get turned into a saint in the name of George Floyd over that situation. But then, Carmelo Anthony, he stabs someone to death, and he gets rewarded for it through crowdfunding. And those are just 2 examples that come to mind, but there's countless examples where people literally get off for murder. And then there's a possibility that some white cuck relative will come out and apologize. Nowadays they're making AI videos where they have their deceased loved one basically stand for their murderer, which is a story that I talked about. I don't know if I talked about it on this channel or on my previous channel. But again, these are real things that exist, real things that are happening, which again allows Rampage Jackson's son to feel emboldened enough to make that sort of attack on live stream and feel fully justified, despite, which was also on live stream, a conversation where they came to an understanding. So that nigga basically lied, acted like he was cool with the joke that happened, held it in to then come out to the ring and try to slam the dude unconscious and then punched him to death. And in the old school wrestling, the wrestlers would have jumped him and beat him half to death. But today's wrestlers, the reason why they didn't do it, because, they didn't want to be called racist, because, that's a crime worse than murder. Just ask Chris Benoit fans that hate Hulk Hogan and celebrated his death because he didn't want his daughter dating a Negro. Again, no one in their right mind would be, because you could say something to your spouse, someone you've been married to, and they'll just snap and see you as a white person and try to kill you or assault you. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this.